Thank you for turning to 10, your news leader. 10 News Conference with Gene Valicenti continues right now.
Welcome back. Pleasure to have Rhode Island Congressman Gabe Amo back with us. Your second or third time in with us. Yeah. Congressman, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Gene.
You know, before we went to the break, I said, you think Donald Trump's wrong on a lot of things. I follow your Twitter feed. Yeah. And I said, how do you want to begin? Chronologically, geographically, alphabetically? What do you prefer? Go ahead.
Well, the things that impact and hurt Rhode Islanders the most. That's where the focus is. It isn't an arbitrary criticism of the president. It's about an agenda that has focused on trying to get tax cuts for billionaires at the expense of government services, at the expense of programs like Medicaid, food assistance. Those are real things that impact the people I work for here in Rhode Island.
Where did you read that he wants to cut taxes and give the money to billionaires? Where did you read this formula? Because he'll tell you just the opposite.
Yeah, he also told us the Project 2025 wasn't his and then hired the architect of that to be his OOMB director. Where it comes from is I'm a member of the House Budget Committee, and they pushed forward a plan endorsed by the president to make severe cuts at the tune of nearly $1 trillion to Medicaid, to SNAP, to critical programs. So I'm not making this up. This is in the fact. I sat in the hearing for 12 hours. They voted it out of the House. I don't want these things to happen, so I'm speaking out to try to prevent them from happening.
And where did you read that? Well, these cuts, I'm going to give that money to my billionaire friends. Where did you read that?
It's how the program is structured, right? They want to pursue $4.5 trillion in tax cuts. $1.1 trillion of that going to the top 1%. This is math. This is the exercise that they're going through. This is the process that gets a little confusing. The House and Senate are working out a budget resolution compromise, and then there's a process of reconciliation. That is what the plan does, and the billionaires will get the tax cuts.
This is actually not new tax cuts. It would be allowing the tax cuts to remain it's an extension of the tax cuts we already have. And according to factcheck.org, 85% of Americans would get some form of a tax cut.
Well, if
you and me and the billionaires. And by the way, what do you care what the billionaire gets? I'm going to give you a tax cut, and I'm going to get a tax cut. Isn't that good?
Well, look, I believe in a country where everybody has opportunity. Everybody can succeed, that we don't concentrate wealth just at the top. That's better for you and me.
85% get a tax cut.
Well, if you're getting a $100 tax cut, is that?
I'll be getting more than that. You'll be getting more than that.
Look, I would say, Gene, let's look at the numbers. We know where the bill is weighted to support. And this is bearing in the facts. Yeah, if 85% of people get something, but if it's a tiny something, and relative to that top 1%, I would not consider that fairness. I don't think that's fair.
Well, the guy who's making billions, he gets a bigger tax cut because he makes more money. And the guy at the bottom, by the way, a lot of people don't even pay taxes at the bottom end. So what's the complaint? You're going to get a tax cut, I'm going to get a tax cut, everybody gets 85%.
Well, look, again, do you want to live in a country, Gene, where the concentration of wealth is such that we are funding and cutting essential programs to fund billionaires? Tax cuts? That's a question of values. And I know the people that I represent here in Rhode Island would prefer that we had tax fairness and not a concentration of wealth as the top.
Well, that's your view, that we're cutting to give the benefit to billionaires. Elon Musk just the other night said, we're cutting to save the country. We have to cut $1 trillion, otherwise we're not going to have a country. And he says, we're not cutting. I know what you're going to say about Social Security. You've been out there, by the way. Some say you're on the scare tour. He says, I'm going to save Social Security, and if you let Donald Trump do what he wants, he'll cut the federal tax on Social Security. That'll be hundreds of dollars more in your pocket. Go ahead.
Well, arbitrarily cutting the functions of the Social Security Administration, how does that make anybody better off? How does that help my constituents? How does firing people at USAID, firing people at NOAA who has technology that keeps our planes in the sky, how does that help anybody and make anybody better off? So all I've got to say about those cuts is that if you wanted a real plan where Congress has the power of the purse, President Clinton pursued something vigorously in collaboration with Congress. This is hacking and slashing away at the functions of government, all, again, in this pursuit of those tax cuts for billionaires. So, again, I sound like a broken record because it's true. There is a reason there's this mad dash, this acceleration of efforts so that they can fund. It's literally to make this work.
That's your story. That's a talking point. You're sticking to it.
Well, let's look at the math.
Elon Musk has his talking points, too. He said, just last night, he said 40% of the calls that come into Social Security are fraud. People people who call in to cheat you out of money. They persuade the operators. He says, I'm going to end that. He also says, I'm going to cut the budget by $1 trillion. If you don't let me do that, we're not going to have a country anymore. Do you see any merit in what he's doing? He's opened my eyes to these NGOs. I never even knew this stuff exists. $2 billion for Stacey Abrams? Come on.
Well, look, again, that is a talking point. Let's be clear.
Is it wrong?
Again, these are all manipulated words in order for him to make his point. And he's trying to make a case. But I will tell you, when I talk to the real people's lives who are going to be negatively affected, who have already been negatively affected by their actions, I don't see any pursuit of efficiency. What I see is an ideological agenda that is focused and concentrated on funding these tax cuts for billionaires.
So no fraud in Social Security. He finds 40% of the calls are fraud. Small Business Association giving loans to people 120 years old, giving loans to 9-year-old children, and on and on and on. Is there no merit?
Well, I look forward to seeing a robust, comprehensive list. You've seen them. Fire people, then unfire them. You've seen them put up lists on their website of all their savings and then take them down, claiming savings from programs that haven't existed in decades. So again, the proof is in the pudding. Put it out. Make it transparent. That is not what's happening. We have these coders, these folks who work on the Elon Musk Doge team, operating in darkness without transparency and not communicating with Congress, not being transparent. That, again, is a problem.
All right, so listen, we can go back and forth. We can go back and forth. But if he shows that he can cut waste, fraud, and abuse from Social Security, and the elders are still going to get their check on time, would you say he's right? Would you come and say, look,
again,
he was right. He saved Social Security.
I haven't seen it yet. I can't. I can't call out outcomes that don't exist. They have not proven at any point that they're marching towards those savings that they're claiming.
Your constituents, I think, would appreciate a cut in federal taxes on Social Security. I don't know, are your parents on Social Security?
My mom is.
Okay, and you know that if he cuts the federal tax on Social Security, it would amount to hundreds of dollars more in her check.
Again, I look forward to seeing this, but we haven't seen it. Over these past nearly 70 days, all we've seen is chaos and confusion. I wake up every morning seeing headlines of disarray from what we see out of this administration, confusion for federal employees. This stuff is not an academic exercise. These are real people's lives that are being impacted. And I don't want somebody on a expedition where they're making claims and not actually delivering results.
So you don't want him in there at all?
Again, he hasn't proven that he is doing the things that they are claiming. And all it seems is more hurt, more confusion, more chaos.
Well, at least he says go on the Doge website. You'll see all the stuff we found. You'll see the billion. Well, you'll see the $2 billion for Stacey Abrams. Oh, you're not going to defend that, are you?
Look,
$2 billion for an organization that never existed on the way out?
I think that is, again, this is one of those things that's fodder all over the place. Again, we haven't actually focused on what the substance of their work has been. They want to throw out names like Stacey Abrams to try to incite politics. But again, I care about the constituents whose lives are affected. If they are serious about their work, there's a different way to do this. It isn't unilateral. Come to Congress where we have the power of the purse.
In a vacuum, would you support cutting the federal tax on Social Security? Forget about who proposes it. Forget about Democrats.
Sure.
Would you support that?
We have to look at the tax structure. The thing, as you know, the tax structure is such that when you pull at one string, you're touching other things. So you have to look at it comprehensively. Right. What I don't want to see is a concentration of wealth at the top. I don't want to see tax cuts for billionaires who don't need them.
All right. Would you support no tax on overtime and no tax on tips?
I think no tax on tips for certain. I think the overtime bit is a little more complicated. So, again, you got to look at this holistically. And if we had a robust plan, bipartisan plan, Republicans and Democrats working together, that would be one thing. But what we see is this pursuit of cuts to Medicaid and SNAP.
All right, listen, when we come...
And that's the plan.
Okay, when we come back, I want to ask if this approach of really going after Donald Trump on Twitter and little videos now, you've all taken to doing stand-ups like a reporter on location. Is that working? Because the polls say no, it's not. You're at 29%. But you think about that during the break. We'll be back with Congressman Gabe Amo. Welcome back. Congressman Gabe Amo is in the House. By the way, let me point out, you drove yourself here this morning. No entourage?
No, I have a staff person who joined me afterward.
Oh, she came later,
yes,
right? But
yeah.
you came in what, your RAV4?
No, I didn't come in the...
You don't want a Tesla?
No Tesla for me.
Yeah. Well, you were at that protest the other day. It was next to the Tesla dealership in Providence. It was at the Jorge Alvarez School. It was organized by the unions. You were there, so were other members of the delegation. Is that the right approach? It was sort of targeting Tesla without necessarily targeting. Is this right?
Well, Elon Musk is the richest man in the world, and he's associated with the companies that he's with, Tesla, Starlink, etc. And so, look, we're bringing attention to the fact that he has this prominent role as a special government employee running this operation. And so that's what he's connected to. At the end of the day, I stand with the working people who are being negatively impacted by a lot of the work of Doge. And so I have been very clear that his role has to be reined in. This hacking at government isn't doing us any good.
But look at the video. Is this right to protest down the street from the Tesla dealership? What do people who drive Teslas have anything to do with it, or the workers at Tesla? You know, Joe Paolino said he wants nothing to do with these people who are burning Teslas, and I know you don't.
No. Look,
well.
I don't condone any violence,
Right.
any crime of any sort. That's never, ever the answer.
But Joe Paolino, having this conversation, he said, my party has no leadership. You're at 29%. The lowest poll since they've been taking these particular polls. Is this approach right? It doesn't seem like it's working to constantly bang Donald Trump.
Well, look, I will tell you, in that same poll you're probably citing, Republicans are only at 36%. So they have nothing to have a ticker tape parade over. Additionally, part of what Democrats want to see from their leaders is fight. In that same poll, 70+% of people said, I want the Democratic Party to fight for our values. I want them to fight against Donald Trump. And look, my constituents overwhelmingly supported me and did not support the president. At the same time, I am always committed to working together. I'm looking for bipartisan solutions, but the president has made no attempts to pursue any sort of bipartisanship. We know that is the case. And so at this point, I have to communicate the harms that are inflicted on the people that I represent. Well,
the public doesn't seem to be buying that communication. 29%. Joe Paolino, just a couple of weeks ago, ran for the number 2 post in the party, the DNC. He said, there's no leadership.
We're 70 days into the Trump administration.
But just address that. Joe said there's no leadership. That's pretty stark, isn't it?
Well, I disagree with him, and he's a good friend of mine. I will tell you that we have a range of leaders. We don't necessarily have a president, a figurehead. That often is what happens when you win the presidency. This is a time for us to look internally, to have a family conversation, to communicate our values. What do we stand for? That's why I stand with working people. That's why I stand against cuts to Medicaid and SNAP. I want everybody to have an opportunity to thrive in our economy, in our country. I love this country. And that is what we have to communicate more of as Democrats, that we are saying these things not because Donald Trump is a small piece of this. I want our country to be strong. I want us to thrive economically. I don't want to see people burdened by costs. That is what we have to stand up for, working people in this country. You were in with me a couple of times before. We chatted on the radio, and I asked you several times. You worked for Joe Biden, and you defended him. Cognitively, no, Gene, everything they're saying about him is not true. And look at this, 2 new books are coming out. Jake Tapper's writing one, almost suggesting it was the biggest cover-up ever, covering up his flaws and his mental ability to handle the presidency. Were you in on that cover-up? Gene, that's not a serious question. It is a serious question. Gene, 2 books are coming out. Gene, you lost the presidency. You said he was competent to me. Respectfully. Yeah. And I say that respectfully, too. It's a fair question. Respectfully, I spoke to, and I have, and I will continue to speak to my experience at the White House, my experience working for the president. And in that time, I saw the president execute the functions of that job in a way that I was supportive of as someone there in the White House. So, again, that's my position, and will continue to be my position. Will always be my position, that I was proud of the work that I was able to do, and proud of the work that he did to usher in key advances for the American people. The book called Fight is coming out. Another book by Jake Tapper suggests that he wasn't up to it from day one. And how about the book Fight says that the vice president and her staff were looking to remove him as far back as 2023. You saw the headlines today. You read the papers just like I do. That's a fair question. Was there a cover-up? Again, I can speak to my experience working for the president.
Yeah.
That and my position is unchanged. I saw him do the job. He grilled me when I was in the Oval Office, asked me to deliver on behalf of the work that we're doing for the American people. And I stand by it, and I'm proud of it.
Then why is he not here? Why was he forced out? If he's so sharp and everything was good, why did the Democrats push him out?
He made a decision.
He didn't make a decision. Nancy Pelosi made the decision.
Well, Gene, I was not in that room. I can't speak to the things that I wasn't there for, and that's a responsible thing to do.
Yeah, but that's a fair question.
Again,
history needs to know.
Again, your question to me: what did I know? What did I experience?
Right.
And I'm always going to speak to my experiences, and that's what I can do.
All right, quick lightning round. You're very critical of Donald Trump withdrawing support for Ukraine.
Yes.
You said that it's a failure. You want to amplify on that?
Look,
because a lot of money's gone over there, billions and billions. And all of it's not accounted for. Zelensky wants more and more. What?
Look, we can always do better to hold our partners accountable, to pursue a mission. But this is a fight for democracy and our values. And what we've done is turn our backs to our European allies. And those alliances, NATO, our key relationships, those are irreparably harmed. And that is something that will bear consequence for us. We cannot acquiesce to Putin and his campaign of aggression against Ukrainians and its impact on all of Europe.
Well, we're in the middle of this now, but if he brings Putin and Zelensky to the table and they hammer out a ceasefire and a peace deal, would that be a good thing, I assume?
Look, as long as we are doing it not to give Putin a gift, that it is a reflection of our values, of our commitment to democracy, because we've been in this situation before. And Putin just, turned his back on those agreements and invaded. So I don't want to be at this table again with that issue.
I'm going to hand you an easy one. I don't know that anybody can defend that the ridiculous signal chat breach. They invited a reporter in on war planning. They can call it whatever they want, but they said this is when we're going to strike. These are when the bombs are going off. So go ahead. I'm going to hand you that. I'm not going to fight you on that.
Well, look, it was irresponsible and makes our country less safe. Very clearly, our Secretary of Defense, our National Security Advisor, are conducting strategy discussions over an unsecured line. There are processes and procedures and ways to have these conversations. We are irreparably harmed by these decisions, and somebody has to be held to account. The Secretary of Defense is not qualified for the role to begin with and has demonstrated that more than one time.
Well, look, on that particular issue, I think you got the upper hand this week, and Jack Reed is really hammering on that. I've got about 30 seconds left. Do you use Signal? The app? I've never heard of it.
Sometimes. Go between Signal and text message, but it's just another messaging platform. It's got encryption on both ends, and it's an option that people use.
Maybe I'll sign up for it. You'll send me some good stuff. All right. Congressman Gabe Amo, thanks for coming in. Good go around today. I'll see you again.
Thank you.
That's 10 News Conference, your number one and longest running political show in Southern New England. A reminder, watch all of our interviews on turnto10.com. I'm Gene Valicenti. See you next week on the news and on the radio.